Hi. Good evening, everybody. Everyone who is in India, and if you're joining from somewhere else in the Western Hemisphere, good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to ScrollStack Academy. For those of you who are new to ScrollStack, let me just give you a very quick preview of what we have. So ScrollStack is a platform where anyone who has any thoughts or ideas can come and actually give shape to their ideas. You can write about them, you can talk about them, you can put videos about your ideas. It is a platform to express yourself and make sure that your voice is heard not just around India but across the globe as well. You can also charge your followers if you're looking to monetize your ideas, and you can do a lot more things. Everybody who's following, and if you haven't signed up for a ScrollStack account yet, it's completely free. Everything that you can do on it is also free, so I highly encourage everybody to go and sign up for an account at scrollstack.com. With that, this is the first session of ScrollStack Academy and ScrollStack Masterclass. So ScrollStack Academy is something that has come up from everything that our creators have been asking for, which is how do we get better? How do we learn from each other? How do we learn from experts as well? As a platform, we host regular creator meets, and one of the things that creators have asked for during these creator meets is how can you get experts to actually come and talk to us about how to do what we do in a better way? How do we get better at what we do? Not necessarily using just ScrollStack, but in general. So that's why we've created ScrollStack Academy, where we will have various initiatives under which you will get to hear from global experts, not just India's experts, on issues like how to be great at creative writing, which is what we are covering today. How do you get started using audio, whether it's podcasts, whether it's stories that you are into, how to do really great business writing, how to be better at Hindi fiction, how to get started at Hindi fiction. We are going to cover a variety of topics. We're going to have a weekly session because there are so many things that we can talk about. We're going to have weekly sessions of weekly masterclasses, as we call them, on ScrollStack Academy. They may not all be in English, by the way. So there are going to be language specific ones that will be in specific languages. We will push out a calendar through various social media channels, so you can sign up for the ones that are most interesting for you. Our first masterclass today that we are launching with is by Arunava Sinha on creative writing. Arunava is somebody who's been associated with us from our very early days of ScrollStack, as well as his journey through Scroll. Arunava is a world famous translator, if I must say so. He has done fantastic books from Bengali to English. And he is also a writer. He also teaches at Ashoka University. He teaches creative writing, and he also is the editor for book section on scroll.in. So with further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Arunava. The format that we are going to follow, by the way, is Arunava is going to speak for about 30 minutes or so, share his thoughts and knowledge. Please keep track of your questions that you want to ask Arunava. Wherever you are following this, you should be able to post questions in the comment sections on that platform. So, for example, if you're following the live tweet live on Twitter, you can post your questions there. If you're doing it on Facebook, you can post your questions there. Or if you're doing it on YouTube, you can post your questions there on the comment sections. We will see all of these things in our interface, and we'll make sure that we are getting to all the questions that you are asking. So with that, Arunava, over to you, and thank you in advance for hosting the first masterclass of ScrollStack Academy.
Thank you, Ritesh, and hello, everybody. It's really fantastic to be here with all of you this evening, or if you're in some other part of the world, afternoon, morning, or whatever time of day it is. Creative writing, of course, is a very complex word and or phrase and needs to be unpacked, and I'm a little wary of it, to be very honest. So maybe we should just simplify our ideas a little bit and just let's talk about writing stories, shall we, to begin with, and then we can look at other things as well if we want to. Now, when we are talking about writing stories, I'd like to start out by asking you, although I know you can't answer right away, but I hope the answer is clicking in your head somewhere, which is very simple, which is, what is the most exciting, delicious form of story that you like listening to? And I'm going to suspend my judgment because I'm equally guilty and I'm going to give you the answer. The answer is gossip. The kind of stories that we most love listening to is gossip, right? And why is it gossip? Why do we love gossip so much? Because of many reasons, right? One, it tells us something that we did not know about somebody or some people. Most important, you're not being told what you knew already. You're being told something that you did not know. This something that you did not know has to be something that invokes some kind of excited reaction in you, right? You're either scandalized or you're um, angry, maybe you're vastly amused, but you're not quiet and unmoved by what you've just heard. Three, sometimes this gossip, very often in fact, is not even about somebody you know. It could be, but it is just as exciting when it is about someone or a bunch of people whom you don't know of, whom you've never met, a friend of a friend of a friend. But you are so excited and you're asking, yeah, what happened next? Then what did he say? What did she say? Where did they go from there? I don't think that was the right thing to say, and so on, right? You get thoroughly involved. And through this whole thing, you have this great frisson running through you because you know that you are listening to something you should not be listening to, right? You are eavesdropping. You are being told a story that is happening in the privacy of someone's life, but in some miraculous way, you are getting to know that story. And that is what makes gossip so exciting. Now, this is not a new idea. This is an idea that I've actually borrowed from one of my creative writing students. Fiction is actually gossip. If you really think about it, what is a story? A story is just that, it's gossip. It's gossip about one or more people whom you do not know, whom you've never met till you started reading that story, possibly. But you are getting to learn things about their lives, things that are happening in there, and their most innermost, most personal, private things, right? You're getting to know things that there is no way you would have known. Even if you were living in the same house as them, you might not have known them. But somehow, in this mysterious fashion, the storyteller is giving you all the gossip about from the lives of one or more people. So let's start there. Let's start with the idea that any story we are writing is essentially going to be gossip. It is going to take your readers into a place where they want to hear every single word that you're writing or speaking. What happened next? What happened after that? Where did they go from there? Right? So when you are thinking up your story, think of it as gossip. Now, this gossip could be real. It could be things that you actually know about from people's lives. It could be made up entirely because you have a very fertile imagination. Or most often, it could be a combination of both of these, where you take some things that you already know and then to them you add some other things. So, why is gossip so very exciting? um, Gossip, as we said, is exciting because you have this sense of not really being allowed in real life to listen to what you're listening, and therefore the storyteller is actually taking you in to a place where you would not normally be. Now, what do you expect? What makes gossip believable? Because now if you're writing a story, you're writing a story that you want your readers to, at least while they're reading the story, believe. You want them to accept that yes, these are indeed the people, this is indeed what happened, this is actually how it all went. So in order to be able to do that, what is it that you need to do to make your gossip real? One, you need people. Yeah, you need people, because without people there is absolutely zero sensation. You can have stories about animals and trees and your favorite furniture, but I don't think I really want to know about the peccadillos of my writing desk. So people. Now, but they can't just be cardboard characters. They can't just be any old people, right? So you have to make them people whom the reader can immediately start thinking about. Now, the great beauty of words, which is what we are writing in, is that words can do two things at the same time. They can tell and they can hide. They can tell so much because words are the medium through which we explain the world to ourselves and to one another. But we also leave it to the listener or the reader of those words to then provide meaning to them. Because the same word or the same set of words can mean entirely different things to different sets of people, right? This is so unlike a film where you're essentially everybody's watching the same scene. Everybody's watching the same characters, saying the same words against the same backdrop, in the same situation, in the same sequence. There is no real scope for the imagination there, because it's all happening at a pace that the director of the film has chosen. So you just sit back and let it wash over you. But when you're reading, it's very different. When you're reading, you can read at your own pace. You can go back, you can go forward, you can stop, you can think, and you can allow those words to mean exactly what they mean to you, going by, as a reader, going by what you can draw from your own life and your experience, right? So words can tell a lot, but words can also hide a lot. Now, in order to use these words effectively, then what's the first thing we must do? It's very important to have create people, real people. And here's a very important rule. You must know 10 times as much about your characters than you're putting in your story. Yeah. So you, as the writer, know your characters intimately. You know everything there is to know about them. You may not be sharing it all with your reader. You probably won't, because then the reader will get bored. But because you know everything, you are able to be convincing when you're talking about any part of their lives, right? Isn't that how it happens in real life? If you don't know a person very well, you can't really explain what they're doing or why they're doing it. But if you know them completely, then you can. So first step, get to know your characters. How do we do that? How do we get to know our characters? So let's start by thinking of a person. Okay, let's start with one character, and then you can use the same structure for other characters as well. So think of a character. And if you don't want to start with boring things like how old they are and what their gender is and where they live and so on, let's start by making them do something. So let's say your character is doing something. Maybe they have just decided to go out in the balcony and scream. Yeah. So here we suddenly meet a character, and the writer meets their character as well for the first time when this character is gone out into the balcony and is screaming their guts out. So then the writer asks themselves, why is this person screaming their guts out? Then they put in an answer, right? They think of, okay, maybe they're screaming their guts out because something horrible has happened to them and they really want to vent. Then they think, but is that the only possible reason? Could there be another one? Because there's a very obvious answer. You scream when you want to vent. What about something weirder? How about maybe this character is a singer and wants to test the volume of their voice, has a concert coming up and is screaming now in order to find out how loud they can go. Yeah, possible. Okay. What else could it be? Maybe the character has eaten something they really didn't like, and they are in pain and they're shouting and screaming because they want to get the pain out of their system, but they can't do it at home because there's a baby sleeping and the baby will wake up and then everyone else will jump down their throat. So now you see what happens is that the moment you ask questions of why your character is doing what they're doing, you start building a situation in which they are and who they are. So you start figuring out, okay, so this character may be a father, or no, let's make the character a mother. No, let's say the character is an 18-year-old, and so on. So you start building the character, and then you start asking questions of that character, and you start having conversations with them. So, what did you eat last night? Where did you get that shirt that you're wearing? Why were you not home 2 nights ago? Those are make up questions. And as you make up these questions, you will find yourself providing answers, and your character is now taking shape in your head. This is the way that we can start building the people who will appear in our stories. It's very important to build these people first, because although you may have a sense of where the story will go, the important thing about a great story is this classic combination, which I actually learned from film director Dibakar Banerjee. He once told me this. He said, in a great story, in a truly great, compelling story, two things will happen. One, what is happening in the story cannot happen to any other characters except the ones in that story. So the experience of the story, the storyline, the plot, everything has to be unique to just those characters. If you put other people in the same situation, the same thing will not happen. And that I found really exciting and valuable, because indeed, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that one exclusive version of a story. It happened only once, and it happened only to this set of people. Two, equally important, given that these people were in this situation, what happened had to happen. It could not have got any other way. So what we're talking about is a perfect combination that you're creating in your head as a writer between where the characters are, where their situation is, and the things that they're encountering and the decisions that they make. Yeah. And all of this you're working on in your head. Now, you may be just thinking it up, you may be writing it out as you are going along, but you are building the story. It does not matter what form you take. Some people will draw, some people will write scenes, some people will write only small paragraphs or even keywords. Some people will only keep thinking and keep it in their head. But you're writing. What you must remember is that writing is not only about putting that finished text on the page. You are writing all the time that you're living your story. Now, what's the next thing? You have your characters. Where are they? When are they? You need to find a space for them. Otherwise, they can't just be suspended in vacuum, right? And if your people are in the year 2020, they'll be behaving a particular way, especially because we know there was a pandemic. If they're just 2019, their lives would be completely different. 10 years ago, very much more different. 50 years ago, hugely different. 20 years in the future, now you start imagining what the future will be like. So when and where are they? Are they in a small town in India? Are they in a bustling metropolis somewhere in South India? Are they in by in sylvan surroundings in a village in eastern India? Are they in some other? I'm just talking about India because that's where we are. But you can think of any space, any country, etc. So you have to create this sense of space. And the sense of space isn't just about latitude and longitude. It's not about a generic city. It's a city. It's like Google Maps. You keep going deeper and deeper, right? You keep using your thumb and forefinger to keep zooming in. So you have a city, then you have a neighborhood, then you have a street, then you have a house maybe, or a space that is occupied by your people, unless they live on the streets, in which case the street is their house. And then you go even further, you go right down to their bedroom or their drawing room, you go right down to their bed or their bathroom or the kitchen, you go right down to the skillet where they make their eggs, right? The space is important. Everything will be happening in a particular space. Now, that space and those characters must be clear and sharp and graphic in your head. Maybe you've not written any of this yet, but you know already. You already know who your people are and where they are and when they are. And you are able to see and hear and know everything that they're doing, right? That's what gives you that unique ability to write a story about them and be a gossip. So the next thing that arises is, what is it that you're going to write about them? Are you just going to describe their day? Are you just going to describe their daily struggles? Are you just going to describe what fun they're having, what excitement's going on? You can, but that is not necessarily the most exciting thing, right? So you have to have what is called a conflict. So what's a conflict? A conflict is when at least two people, maybe more, but you need at least two, are clashing with each other with different objectives. One wants to do one thing, another wants to do another completely different thing. And somehow they're in the same space and time so that it is not possible for both the things to happen simultaneously. Either person A will get their way or person B will get their way. But of course, in any situation in life, both of them want to get their way and both of them are going to try very hard to achieve what they want to achieve, right? Now, it could be something very banal. It could be something as simple as someone trying to get out of bed and someone else saying nobody's getting out of bed today. That's a conflict situation. It may sound very stupid and banal, it is, but it is still a conflict situation. Now, of course, are we interested in a person getting out of bed and being unable to because someone's holding them back? We might be, if you can create a realistic enough situation to make this important. But usually conflicts tend to be stronger. They tend to be about larger, more important things, right? So it could be about love, it could be about death, it could be about personal ambition, it could be about those very many big things that give us anxiety and keep us awake at night. So you have to pick a theater for the conflict that is large and sufficiently exciting for readers to say, hey, I want to know more. I want to know where this conflict goes. So Now you are beginning to write what is known as the plot, which is that you're beginning to delineate the things that happen in your story, the things that happen to your characters. Now, there's a simple rule of thumb, which you can break, but first you must know the rule before you break it. What's the simple rule of thumb? Which is that there must be something that I, as the reader, want to know the end of. How is this going to end? Now, maybe you're writing a story, let's say, about the political situation in Western India, in Bombay. Or maybe you're writing a story about pollution in Delhi. Or maybe you're writing a story about gender wars. And you really are not interested in a story so much as portraying the kind of clashes, portraying the kind of trouble, portraying the kind of patriarchy, or portraying the kind of political thought, and so on and so forth. But your reader still wants to know what happened next. So you have to create a storyline. Now, maybe your storyline is the single most important thing, or it's not. Maybe your storyline is just a way to introduce your characters to your readers, because that is what you're most interested in. You found the three most interesting characters to write about, and you want to tell your readers what's so special about them. But are you just going to make character sketches saying, what's so special about them is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? No, that's not a story. So you have to create a story. So as Kurt Vonnegut once said, imagine that you are writing this story which is set in a subway train, a metro train, where there are, let's say, 3 or 4 characters, and they're having this intense discussion about something. And your story really is a vehicle for you to present those arguments on different sides and show us how human thought varies so much, and how there is philosophical angst and existentialist ennui or whatever. But if you're a good writer, what you're going to do is that you're going to make one of those characters have a wad of chewing gum stuck in their teeth. And that character, in the midst of all this exciting, fiery conversation, is trying to get the chewing gum out of their teeth. And you know what? The reader is hooked. Now, the reader is reading all that you're saying, but the reader really wants to know whether this character gets the chewing gum out of their teeth by the time they get out of the train. Because maybe this character is going to meet someone whom he does not want to present with a mouthful of chewing gum. So, suspense. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? This is what he meant by having a narrative hook to pull the story along while you are doing what you're doing with the story. Now, should your story be all about incidents? No. If it is, then the characters don't matter, right? Incidents are very important. The conflict is very important. The clashes are very important. The climax is very important. Maybe things get completely out of control before they are resolved. But if you only talk about the incidents and not about the people to whom they are happening, then it sounds just like a sketch. It sounds like a diagram. It does not sound real. Yeah. At the same time, if you have only people and nothing much is happening to them, then that's also not going to work, because I might ask, why are you even writing this? Great, you know these people, good for you. Why do I need to know them? Where's the goss? So where's the gossip? So just as gossip might not make sense unless you know the people, people don't make sense in a story unless you know the gossip. So it's got to be a combination of the people and the gossip, and you can't really keep them apart from each other. The elements of gossip come up the way they do because of the person being who they are. And because the persons are who they are, the gossip unfolds the way it does. That's what Diwakar said. Remember that these incidents can only happen to these people. And when these people are here, only these incidents can happen. So this is the great structure or test that you must apply to the story that you're writing. Does your story check these boxes? It may not. You may consciously choose not to check some of them. But what is important then is that you have consciously decided to absorb those elements. But if you are writing normally, naturally, and you're not trying to specifically leave out certain aspects of storytelling, then these 3 elements, just to recap: people or characters, incidents or action, and place or the space where it is all happening. Now, all of these need to come together to create a uniform, integrated story. The best stories will so weave in the space and the characters and the incident that you will not be able to tell them apart, right? Poorly written stories do these things separately. They will first describe the place to you, then they will describe the people to you, then they will start with the incidents. That's not the best way to write. The best way to write is when I learn about the people through their incidents, through their dialogue, and then I learn about the space from what is happening to the people. A very well-known writer in Bangla, very senior person named Sunil Gangopadhyay had once, I remember, he was addressing a bunch of first-time storytellers, and one of them asked him, "How do we start a story? Where do we start a story?" And he said, "Start a story in the middle of some kind of action. Your character, who could be your main character or who could be a peripheral character, let them be doing something. And it does not have to be anything very significant, but let them be doing something somewhere that immediately brings to you an action. It's like, imagine if you were watching a film or if you were watching a play, you immediately have a sense of where it is all happening and some kind of movement. So, so and so character was jumping down the stairs, was running down the stairs. So and so character was cooking an egg. So and so character was shouting at their partner. So and so character was crying. Something that is happening. And then from there, the question arises. Now, you could start your story with just such a line and then ask yourself, why were they crying? Why were they jumping down the stairs? Where were they going? Why were they shouting at their partner? Did they have a quarrel? Are they going to have a quarrel? Is this the beginning of the quarrel or the end of the quarrel? And so on. I'm not going to get into what you're going to put in your story. You know that. Every writer knows what they want to write about. The question is, having decided that, how do you get the elements that make it into a compelling story that will make that will give the reader reason to read and then to think about it. Now, I'm going to talk about a very short story, which actually, in some senses, does not match any of the rules that I set out. And yet you will see that it does. Now, what is important is that it is not necessary to spell out every element of what I just mentioned. You don't have to spell out everything about the characters. As I said, you already know, 90% more than you're going to say. But even what you want the reader to know need not be spelled out in as many words. The reader can do the job for you. If you are really skillful, you can make the reader do it. And the beauty of that is that each reader will do it in their own way. And thus, while you have written one story, you've actually got as many stories as there are readers. So I'm going to tell you a very short story. Some of you may be familiar with it already. It is attributed to the writer Ernest Hemingway. Here's how it goes. It's just 6 words, 3 sentences, 6 words, 3 sentences of 2 words each. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. If you think of this, you immediately, each of you will in your head start filling in the reasons. What's going on here? Why are these baby shoes on sale? Who's selling them? Why were they never worn? Questions, and more questions. And then you try to fill in answers. And depending on what kind of answers you fill in, the story can be extremely tragic, or it can be comic if someone is imaginative enough. It can be just mildly sad. It can be about a commercial enterprise. It can be satirical. It can be a lot of things. And if you actually fill in the detail, you will find that in your head, you have created the characters, you have created the space, you have created a conflict. You've done all of these things just by extrapolating from these 6 words. So that's what a great story does, actually. A great story will not tell you everything. It will also make you work through it and come up with where it might go. And one way of doing that, one very important way of doing that is that just as you know much more about your characters than you are letting on in your story, you must also know a lot more about the story than you are revealing. So you don't start a story at the beginning of the story because no one knows where the beginning is. Because wherever you start, you can always say, but something happened before this. It didn't happen in a vacuum that led up to this, right? And similarly, where you end the story is not where the story ends. It's just where you decide, I'm not going to tell you anymore. But obviously, whatever happens at the end of the story will have further consequences and more things will happen. And to the people to whom it's happening, there's no story with a distinct beginning and a distinct end. They're going through life, many things are happening to them. A storyteller picks a certain point in their life and tells the story of what happened in that time. But it is not a beginning, not an end, it is a segment. And because you know much more about what happened before, the backstory, as they call it, and what happened after, the sequel, if you like, your reader will also fill in with their imagination, and they will have in that story an entire world, much more than you have actually written in words. Now, there are, of course, many other decisions you'll have to take, but I'm going to leave you with one point about one final and very crucial decision, which is this. When you're telling this story or you're writing this gossip about these characters, who is telling the story and how much do they know? The most common form of storytelling is what is called the ubiquitous narrator. The ubiquitous narrator is a sort of godlike figure who mysteriously knows everything that's happening in everyone's lives and even knows what's happening in people's heads, and therefore can dip in and out of the action, in and out of people's minds, and give you everything that is happening from multiple points, which is not a realistic situation at all in life. You will never be everywhere at the same time as a person, nor will you know what is going on in people's heads. Most people try to hide what they think. So a story in that sense is using a narrative device that is a bit of magic. It's magical, right? So you have to decide how much magic you're going to bring to your storytelling. Are you going to say, I'm that strange person, that mythical person who knows everything here, and so I can tell you whatever I choose to? You can also tell the story from the point of view of one of the persons, right? You can say, hey, I don't know what's happening in the other people's heads, but I know this one person. So I'm going to tell you everything the way they see it and the way they perceive it. You can even write it in the first person as one of those persons. You can even go deeper into their minds and say, this story is only going to be everything that happens to this person or this person sees or this person knows and nothing more. So in a sense, it's a bit of a limitation, because you can, in the first person, you can only tell what the person who is writing in the first person or speaking in the first person actually knows. But it can also be great fun, because then you can leave the reader completely identified with this person who's telling the story and leave them as confused, as puzzled, as angry, as happy, as sad, anything you want to, because you're able to channel this person perfectly. But this decision is a very important one. What point of view, what perspective you're going to tell your story from. And finally, after you finished your story and read it, if it reminds you of anything that you know already, kill that story. You have to write something that nobody's read before. You cannot write a story that people will enjoy just because it is something that you know and has happened to you, but has also happened to millions of people. Your story has to be unique, but a great story, through its uniqueness, will take your reader to a place that they already know. So, this is something that the writer Nadeem Aslam once said. He said, a great work of literature is one that takes me to a place where I've never been. But when I get there, I find that, hey, I know this place like my own life. I know this person like I know myself. And that is really the beauty of great literature and a great story. I'm going to stop here. We could, of course, go on talking about many things. And I'm hoping this has given you some ideas. And I'm happy to hear questions and attempt to answer them. I'm not saying I'll have answers. But thank you for listening.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Arunava. This was fantastic. I know we've hung out a bunch and we've talked a bunch, but this is a completely different side that I've seen of you, which I am now going to pick your brains about next time when we meet as well. Not that I aspire to write, but it's a very interesting space, uh, according to me, and it has clearly jogged a lot of people's thinking because we've got a fair amount of questions. So we will try and cover as many questions as possible. By the way, Arunava, Radhye, who's one of our regular creators, they write under Open Darbar. They love the chewing gum analogy, so they just want to make sure that you know that there was
Yeah, well,
something
it's
that they.
fine. It's Kurt Vonnegut's, and I'd advise all of you to actually go and look up some of the things that Kurt Vonnegut has said. He's also created a classic structure of a story with a graph and a y-axis and an x-axis. Quite fascinating.
Amazing. So science of art. That is amazing. All righty. So let's get into the questions. So So Saransh Bisht wants to know what are the qualities of good writing. I know you touched on some of these things, but if you want to paraphrase them fairly quickly, Arunava, uh, that'll be great for Saransh. So the question again is, what are the qualities of good writing?
Okay. The qualities of good writing are really sharpness, brevity, and the ability to make the reader think. But brevity and sharpness and economy is very important. Never write 10 words where 8 will do. Never write 8 words where 4 will do. Write a sentence and start cutting words from it to see if you can say the same thing with fewer words. Just that one rule alone can elevate writing to a great extent.
Got it. Excellent. And also that answer was also a good example of brevity. So thanks, Arunava. Jayashri Lalla asks, do all the stories need to be realistic always?
Realism is a defeat of the imagination. There's enough realism in all our lives. We are not reading for more realism, right? We are reading for truth, and the truth is almost never realistic because you don't find it often. So no, they don't need to be realistic at all. This is where your imagination can make things happen that might not happen in your everyday lives. It's very important. The one thing I would advise every potential writer to do is to try and remember your dreams. Your subconscious is a tremendous source of ideas, and it is able to take the world and turn it around and cook it in a completely different way. And if you can capture some of that, you are going to have fantastic stories. And the elements will be real, but they'll add up to something completely unique.
Got it. The next question is by a couple of different people. It's clearly on people's minds. So Sampurna and Gangesh both want to know how do you deal with writer's block? What are your views on writer's block? Might be a cliche, but a very real problem.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a real problem, but I always think of writer's block as a block in the way of a particular story, not in the way of writing. And writing, as I said earlier, is also not a matter of only putting words on paper. So if you're facing a block with the story that you're writing, write another story, write a different story, or just have a conversation with your characters. Do something that keeps you in that story, that continues so that you continue to occupy the space of that story, even if you don't know what's happening. Because hey, in real life sometimes nothing happens for a year, right? Look at 2020, classic example. So it can happen. If in real life nothing can happen for a year, then you have to give yourself that kind of privilege to know that okay, nothing can happen for a few days in my head, but meanwhile I don't stop living with these people. So you think about them, you talk to them, you tell them jokes, you make them tell you jokes, you take them for walks, and sooner or later something will emerge out of it, but and keep your riyaz going. Say I will write a one-line story, say I will write a 4-word story, say I will write a story in rhyme, but keep your riyaz going, because your writing muscles need to be, it's like physical muscles. You need to keep them even if you're not doing your whatever your gym goal is every day, but you need to do something, right? So yeah, it's something like that.
Got it. Janvi wants to know, how do you get creative writing ideas?
So as I said, delve into your dreams, delve into your memory, and then I have one very simple, very simple suggestion. And if you do that, you're bound to get 100 ideas, which is be shameless and eavesdrop. Eavesdrop on people, eavesdrop on conversations, eavesdrop on any two people talking. It's hard nowadays, I know, with social distancing, but that will change. Go out, meet people, do things. That's where ideas come from. And if all else fails, read the papers. Many famous stories have been written inspired by headlines. But if you eavesdrop, you will get fantastic stories. When I was much younger, when we had this thing called PCO, where you could make long distance calls, So phones were not very easily available. So you went to this long distance calling booth if you had to call someone in another city. And typically the rates were lowest after 10 o'clock at night. So you went after 10 and there was a queue of about 20 people. So you got to hear 20 different conversations. It was brilliant. A writer could have made a lifetime, could have made a career out of the conversation that you overhear. And you also need to overhear conversations when people don't care that they're being overheard, like phone conversations. You have to catch them in the right spaces. You'll get superb ideas from there.
Got it. And I think there is a connected question that is right next to them. Bharati has asked that question, which is how do you get ideas to sketch a character? Right. So I think it might be a continuation of your answer, but I think would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So there you are. Think of something that you saw on the road. Okay. Someone doing something. Now just start thinking, ask yourself, keep asking questions. Why did they do this? What happened before that? Why did they make this particular choice? And start providing answers. As you do that, you'll find yourself building that character, and that character you're building in your head may have no real, nothing to do with the character you saw, but you just took a starting point. Okay, maybe there's a character who's just sitting on the pavement. I mean, you see people like this, right? You see somebody sitting on the pavement and weeping. So you just think, why is this person weeping? And then you abandon the first answer because that's a cliched answer. Because you'll say that they've just had they've broken up. And then you say, chuck that. It depends on how old you are, of course. At 50, you don't think of that. But yeah, you say something, say, no, that's a bad thing. That happens to 500 people. Let's find an answer that can only happen to this one person. And from there, you keep asking more questions. What do they do? What did this person just eat? Whom did they just meet before? Whom do they meet every day? Where do they live? What kind of clothes do they wear? Whom do they talk to? And start filling in the details. And before you know it, your character is there in front of you.
Got it. And a connected question that Digant Shetty is asking is, how do you find unique voice when you're writing multiple characters? Isn't it a paradox?
Yeah. So you don't have to. You don't have to find one unique voice at all. Your story will be very, very, it'll be of a great quality if you can actually make multiple characters speak in multiple voices. You should. But what is unique about the story is that you're giving each character a voice of their own. It is not essential to have just one unique voice. Otherwise, it's very boring. Imagine every character speaking the same way. That's going to be really dull.
Got it. All right. There is an interesting question that Dipankar Das is asking, which is, how do you teach creative writing?
You basically poke people to write. You can't teach anyone to how to write. You can teach them how to love writing. So you create situations where they end up falling in love with the idea of writing, and you do that by engineering these situations where if they don't write, they'll die. So it's that kind of thing. Oh my God, I have to write. So you do that, and then the rest of it is a matter of advice, suggestions, and so on. But always nudging. It's never about do this and do that. It's always about nudging. It's always about wanting to read what they've written. It's always about saying that I know you've written 2 sentences, but let's sit together and write 4 sentences, and so on. It's about helping people discover who they are as writers. And so much of that has to do with a person discovering who they are as a person. If you ask yourself, who am I? That is half the answer of being a writer.
Got it. There are a couple of questions around translations work that you do, Arunava, as well. While we will have a separate session just on translations as well, but I think because people are asking, we should cover them. The first one is by Jayashri, which is, you are also a translator as mentioned. What difficulties do you face when translating stories? Do you sometimes feel you miss out on the original essence of the story?
Well, I hope not to miss out on anything. For me, the most important way of judging translation, whether it's my own or somebody else's, is my own actually, is to check whether I'm hearing the same story in my head when I'm reading the translated version. It's not so much about specific words and phrases. It's not about mechanical accuracy. mechanical accuracy is a given that anybody can achieve, and increasingly Google Translate will help you achieve that at the level of the word. But what matters is, are you hearing the same story? Are you hearing the same sound? Are you hearing the same music? Are you hearing the same silences? Are you hearing that same symphony, as it were, that you heard when you read the original? If you feel you're missing out on this, then your translation is a failure, and you have to go back and do it again. So the whole idea is to be successful, not to fail.
Got it. And Debarpan Ghosh asks, apart from your own works, what translated works have really stayed with you and why, both in the languages you work and in otherwise?
I mean, I think 75%, that's a random number, but it just indicates the weightage. But 75% of what I've read is translations. I mean, thank goodness now you no longer have to turn to only literature written originally in English in order to feel that you're reading a lot. You can now read literatures from Latin America, from the European countries, from, very importantly, from Asia, and then also from different parts of India. So it no longer matters to me whether translated literature is the heart and soul of what I read. And almost any other book, the best ones have stayed with me always. I mean, I'm sure those who've read Gabriel Garcia Marquez know that his works have stayed with you always. But there are at least 2 dozen or 3 dozen other writers I could mention whose works have stayed with me. If you want to know the most recent novel that completely blew me away, is this novel that won the JCB Prize. It's called Mustache in English, translated from Malayalam by Jayashree Kalathil. It's the first novel written by S. Harish, who's also written the screenplay and the story on which India's entry to the Oscars, Jallikattu, is based. And it's the most remarkable story. And trust me, it's not a story you're going to read written in any other language. So for me, translated literature is really it. That's where the action is.
Got it. Excellent. So on the language front, Arunava, there is a question that was also on my mind when I was sort of like thinking of this session. Ila Reddy is asking this question, which is, how do you write authentic dialogues in English when the character's language is Avdi or any other language, right? So how do you get that right?
Yeah, no, that's a superb question. And that's also the translator's classic dilemma. How do you... So you see, when you are writing, you are first asking the reader to suspend their disbelief, in the sense of you're asking them to believe that all that is written in the book actually happened, even though they know that it is a work of fiction. And then when you're translating, whether you are translating from your head or whether you're translating from a work that has already been written in another language, you are asking for a second layer of disbelief. Now you are asking your reader to believe that these characters living in Lucknow, who clearly speak in Awadhi at home and between themselves, are in some miraculous fashion speaking in English. So it's a tremendous leap, right? You're making a huge demand of the reader in the first place. So what do? There's no one answer. Frankly, you can choose a number of different strategies. But one key thing to remember is, for instance, what kind of Awadhi are they speaking in? Are they speaking in a mellifluous, slightly classical Awadhi? Then maybe the English they need to speak should also be mellifluous and somewhat classical. If, on the other hand, they're using a very street version of their language, then your English, rendered into English, it needs to have a street element to it. Yeah. So it's not just about the words themselves. In fact, you can very well write something in English and make the reader feel that they're reading it in Awadhi. That will be the real measure of your success if you can do that. But to do that, you have to choose that precise, that intonation, the flavor, the way that they would speak if they were speaking in English. You know what I mean? And I know this is not a very helpful suggestion, but it is also something that you can continuously use as a benchmark to see if you've achieved or not. So when you've made your characters speak in English, do they sound in your head? Can you actually hear the words in Awadhi? If you can, you've cracked it. If you can't, go back and do it again.
Got it. So now there's a question by Shehnaz Akhtar. they say, how do you practice? How to practice before you start writing? Which is there a small exercise that helps build a rhythm and the skill?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, set yourself exercises like, for example, you go out on the balcony and you see something opposite, right? Just write it. Write it in sharp, clear terms. Don't worry about the story or anything, but write it in a way that someone who is not standing in the balcony with you will be able to visualize everything that you're seeing, will be able to hear everything that you're seeing, will be able to smell everything that you can smell, will be able to touch everything that you're touching. Okay, do these small exercises. This is the way in which you will start internalizing ways of telling, describing scenes. Write a scene involving dialogue between two people, and don't make it very banal. Make it so. For example, one exercise I always set my students is that two people have met, and they are both in relationships with other people, but they desperately want to flirt, but they are not in a situation where they can openly flirt. Maybe they're middle-aged, maybe their partners are around them. So write a conversation between them where they're dancing on the edges, where each knows what the other is up to, but neither can spell it out in as many words. Now write a scene. So set yourself exercises like these, which are not very everyday situations, very, very unique and difficult situations to write about. And that is how you will be able to get your muscles acting.
Got it. That is something I want to read, by the way. I would love to. That's fascinating exercise.
Yeah,
A follow-up question that, yeah. So another follow-up question that Shahnaz has is, any good book as a guide for writing or other aspects of writing that you recommend?
don't read those. Please don't. Just read good fiction. Read fiction that you enjoy. Okay? Read as much as you can. And you will automatically find that you are learning. You don't even have to sit down and take notes, but you will find that the more you read, the more you will be internalizing the methods that writers are using. Read mindfully, read a little slowly, but read as much as you can. Please don't read guides to writing. Please don't. In fact, ideally, you should not even have been listening to this talk.
Got it. All right. Another person, so Shrishti Gupta, is also asking for some tips on short stories or punchlines that you can recommend.
Short story? Yeah, read the short stories of. Okay, read. I don't know what you mean by punchlines for posters. Do you mean like short stories with twists in the tail? I don't know. But anyway, read Edgar Allan Poe, read O. Henry, read Saki, read Roald Dahl, read F. Scott Fitzgerald. I'm talking about short stories specifically. Read in India, read the short stories of all of the, at least one woman writer in each language. Read Ambai in Tamil, read K.R. Meera in Malayalam, read Anita Agnihotri in Bengali, read Pratibha Roy in Odia, read certainly read Manto. Most definitely read Manto. Most definitely read as many writers in Urdu as you can in translation if you can't read the original. They wrote the most fabulous stories. Read lots of stories. You'll get something out of each of them.
Yeah. That's amazing. And by the way, people, don't worry about writing down all of these names. This video will be available afterwards for everybody to watch. So you can always skip to 54 minutes and actually get all of these names for yourselves. So Akshay asks Arunava, suppose I want to write a suspense story. What is the process essentially?
Okay, there's no one single process, obviously, right? It is unique to every writer. But of course, the main thing is you must know what's going to happen. You must know, first and foremost. Your reader must not know, but you must know. And then you must work out all the alternative paths that will take your characters there. So you can start with the plot and add the characters, but remember then that the characters cannot be extraneous to the plot. You cannot force the characters to do something that would not come to them naturally given who they are. So if it's the plot that you're starting with, you must build your characters in a way that their decisions come entirely organically given the way the story flows. And the other thing is that you need to, if you're a really smart, clever writer, you need to leave some hints of what will happen, which become obvious only when the reader has read through till the end. Then they say, oh, that was what was happening there. I never realized. The other kind of suspense, which is very interesting, and think about it, is when your reader knows what's happening, but your characters don't know. And then the suspense is not about what happened, but the readers are now invested in finding out when the characters will get to know, because they know that once the characters find out what has happened, everything will change. So that's another way in which you can write your suspense stories.
Got it. All right. So we have our last question because we are running out of time. And this is a question that might be on a lot of people's minds, Arunava, and it has sort of like, is it at the intersection of writing and what ends up happening with it, right? So Vishwajit, who's one of our creators on ScrollStack, he writes in sort of Marathi and Hindi. He's asking, how should small town writers or lyricists present their work to movie makers without actually going to Mumbai and without having any connections, if that is possible at all? So I think this might be a thing on a lot of people's minds these days.
Yeah. Look, there's only one answer to that: find an agent. Unfortunately, we live in a world, we live in a marketplace, and in a marketplace there are always people in between the creators and the consumers. There's got to be a channel in between, and find literary agents or agents who will represent you to movie makers, because quite frankly, I'll tell you, if you're a creative person, stick to creating. If you spend your energies in negotiating and finding whom to sell your story to, and then being, jumping through hoops, as a result of that, you'll end up hating everything and you might end up not writing also. So don't do that. Let someone else do that work, because that's what they do best. You do what you do best. Find an agent.
Got it. Excellent. So thank you so much, Arunava, once again for all of your time, all of your insights, all of your knowledge. I think we could have gone on for another hour because there is so much to talk about, as you had said, and people had a lot of questions as well. And for everybody who's watching and listening, as I said earlier, this video will be available for later on. We will also be doing a follow-up session on translations with Arunava at a later date. So stay tuned for that as well. And then we will also publish the calendar for the upcoming conversations for next week and then the following weeks as well. So stay tuned for that. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We're going to end with a video by one of our creators on ScrollStack, who will epitomize a lot of the things that Arunava talked about. His name is Ron Fassler. He's based in New York. He is an actor and actually writes about Broadway. So if we can end with his video and just his journey and how he goes about it. And with that, everybody who's tuned in, if you haven't already checked out ScrollStack and haven't created an account, please do so. Please help us spread the word as well. And again, thank you for being part of the launch of ScrollStack Academy and our very first masterclass. Looking forward to seeing a lot of you week over week. We are excited to embark on this initiative to make sure that we are also giving back to the creator community, and we are creating a space for the creator community to come together and learn from each other. So if any of you also, by the way, want to host a masterclass, if you think that you have a lot to offer to the community, please reach out to us at creators@scrollstack.com. Email address again is creators@scrollstack.com. So with that, thanks everybody. Have a great evening or a great day if you're outside of India, and see you all next week. Can we please play
A 5-year-old kid went to see Robert Preston on a Broadway stage. From that day on, hooked for life. Hi, I'm Ron Fassler. I write a column called Theater Yesterday and Today. I love the theater. It's been a part of my life ever since I was a little boy. Whenever I'm in the theater district, I'm struck by the fact that it's only 1 mile long. 45th Street. It's the one block that has 9 Broadway houses on it. And I just stand there and look at the marquees when they're lit against sometimes the night sky. And it is nirvana. It's magic. It's Broadway.